Hello, we're the Lost Boys. I'm Tandy, and that's Harlan. Say hi, Harlan.
Hi, Harlan.
And in today's video, we are going to be discussing Ruby from Chapter 2, Rise of the Floodborn in Disney's Lorcana, and doing a full set review over this color. We've done the 3 colors so far, and I've had a good time doing it, and let's just jump right in. Harlan, we're going to start with Scar, Vicious Cheater. This is a 7-cost, uninkable 6/5 iteration of Scar. The quest for 2 has Rush, so it can challenge the turn it comes into play. And the ability, Daddy isn't here to save you. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of the turn. What do you think about this powerful 7-drop from Ruby?
This card is fantastic. Yeah, it's been way stronger than I thought it was going to be. I thought this card would be completely sat on by Be Prepared. But basically what this card does is it comes down, eats as much of your opponent's board as it is allowed to do. If it doesn't die from the challenge or 2 that it gets in, it's readied so your opponent can't challenge it back. And then, so they need to play to the board, because you have like a 2-point quester that also is threatening to challenge something. But then this can just sing Be Prepared. So it's like the perfect card to pair with it.
Nice. I didn't think about that.
Exactly. It also punishes your opponent for the turns where, you know, they already have a board presence, so they'll quest and they aren't going to play more into the Be Prepared. Then the Scar just comes in, cleans up the board, and you're ahead on board. It's just been phenomenal. It does have some tension in that they're both 7-cost and uninkable, but you're kind of already built towards that plan anyway.
Right.
So it's just about managing your uninkable count, and the card has just been phenomenal.
Yeah, the uninkable count, I think, is the big thing. You know, we've seen some stress with Be Prepared, Rafiki, and some of the other big amethyst drops like Ursula that are uninkable. And so it'll be interesting to see if this just supplants some of those other uninkables that you see out of the Ruby Amethyst deck. But yeah, I mean, if it plays as well as you say, then I'm very excited about it. I was already pretty excited about it, but that's sweet. Next up, another 7-drop. This is going to be Lumiere Hotheaded Candelabra, 7-cost inkable, 7/7, so very large, and a quest for 2, but no abilities.
Yeah, I think this card's just going to be mostly a limited card. Ruby is not a color that really struggles for stats. You know, we've seen Scar, we have Maui. Granted, those aren't really great questers. They're more character challenge focused, but we're not scraping the barrel for big characters in this color.
Next up, moving on, we're going to be talking about Lady Tremaine, Imperious Queen. This is a 6-cost uninkable 3/4, the quest for 2. It does have a shift, so we're going to be looking for some smaller Lady Tremaines just for 4. And it says the ability Power to Rule at Last. When you play this character, each opponent chooses and banishes one of their characters. So it's like an edict effect. Your opponent chooses, but it does act as removal, and it can be removal as early as turn 4 if you can shift with it.
Yeah, so we are getting to this a little bit later. You know, we've been playing with the cards now. Going in, this card rang to me that, like, this card is incredibly strong, even though it's uninkable. Like, absolutely, I'm going to be playing minimum 2 copies in basically every Ruby deck. I'll probably end up playing 4 in most of them. The card just seemed fantastic to me, and it has kind of defined the metagame initial weeks. The card is incredibly strong. You don't even need to be shifting it because it only costs 6. When you are shifting it, though, it's kind of ridiculous because you are either doing it very early in the board and being very ahead on board because you get that 2 points of questing in, or you're double spelling, which is also incredibly strong on like turn 6 because you're additionally getting that tempo positive 2 points of lore in. The card is just fantastic, and it's here to stay.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it because when I first saw it, I thought it was awesome as well. We talked about the 6-cost Yzma from Amethyst that does something kind of similar. It's a 6-drop that comes in and blows something up. It gives your opponent 2 cards, or you can target your own thing and draw 2 cards. But for this, that edict effect, I was afraid that only chewing up like a small character, a 1 or a 2 drop out of Amber or Steel, might limit its effectiveness. But I think that it's pretty clear that, for example, Ruby Amethyst Control is just very good at controlling those early characters with things like Gaston, Arrogant Hunter, and Rafiki, Sage. And this just coming down on curve naturally just feels like a very disgusting effect. So I'm glad that it's playing as good as we originally thought. Next up is Raya, Leader of the Heart. 6 cost Inkable 5/3 with Shift 4, and it quests for 2. And the ability Champion of Kumandra. Whenever this character challenges a damaged character, she takes no damage from the challenge. Wow.
Yeah, I think this card has a potential future based completely around that shift ability. I think it is a great addition to Maui in a lot of Ruby decks. But, when you aren't shifting this, the card gets a little too easy to play around from the opponent's side, where they don't have to expose damaged characters to this to be challenged.
My big thing is that it's difficult in Lorcana, from my experience, to leave characters on the table with damage on them. Either doing so is a huge punish with things like Rapunzel, and now all of these things like, being challenged. So like there's such a high incentive to just trade off your characters when they start like taking that chip damage. And just the nature of the way the game is played. We have, characters that have like high strength, low willpower, or low willpower, high strength. But oftentimes it becomes like 2 pieces of a puzzle, and you find ways to trade up, and you trade your stuff into theirs so that you essentially leave nothing with damage on it basically ever. So if I do want to use this card, I think it's going to have to pair in Steel so that you can do some of that AoE, that like spray damage, or some more pinpoint damage. But overall, I'm not super excited about it, but it's a cool card. Next up, we're going to be doing the second iteration of Ratigan that I've seen. This is a Ratigan Very Large Mouse, 5 cost Uninkable 3/3, quest for 2 with the ability This Is My Kingdom. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing character with 3 strength or less. Choose one of your characters and ready them. They can't quest for the rest of the turn. So essentially, your thing gets exerted, my thing gets readied, as long as they're small enough on the opposing side, and that allows you to trade your stuff into theirs. This seems like an interesting card, but maybe a little difficult to utilize and constructed, but perhaps absolutely phenomenal in, say, Draft or Seal deck.
Yeah, I think this card, again, that Uninkable is going to hold a lot of cards back, especially the situational ones like this one, where, this effect when it's happening is extremely powerful, where, I get a kind of like a free quest in with my character. I get to ready it. I get to set up a challenge on your thing that you've been trying to protect, or you really need to ready with, like an Aerial Spectacular Singer or something like that.
Right.
That's really powerful, but this is competing with cards like Lady Tremaine and Scar, and just, isn't quite as powerful as those things, even when it's doing its thing.
I agree.
I like the card a lot. I hope it sees a lot of play. I think it's going to get, kind of held back.
Next up, this is Queen of Hearts, Sensing Weakness, 5 cost Inkable 4/3, as Shift 2. So very similar to the Queen from Amber being able to shift for 2. If we get a 1-drop Queen of Hearts, this can shift on turn 2 and be quite explosive. It does only quest for 1, but it has the ability to let the game begin. Whenever one of your characters challenges another character, you may draw a card.
Yeah, this card really intrigues me because you get it immediately, right?
Yes.
You are going to get your card, maybe even 2, immediately when you play this, and that is really powerful.
It also adds a lot of value to things like the Ratigan we just looked at, where you have the ability to exert your opponent's stuff.
Yeah, that's true, where you can play this, get your card or 2, and then the following turn where they have maybe rebuilt their board or tried to play around you being able to challenge and get more cards because they haven't gotten this off the table yet. That's where a card like the Ratigan can shine, where you're generating additional value on top of its ability. The problem is that, these cards are competing on slot with Maui, where, that
Sure.
5, Maui is always going to be present of this thing is really good and costs 5. What are you doing that's better than this or different than this? And, Queen of Hearts is definitely a card that you can play like 4 Mauis and like 2 of this, no problem.
Right, because it has the shift and also is inkable too, unlike the Ratigan. Next up, we're going to talk about Donald Duck. Not again! 5 cost, inkable, 1/5, the quest for 1, evasive, with the ability Fooey. This character gets +1 lore for each damage on it. Very weird card, but perhaps strong. Evasive does do some really cool stuff when you're able to challenge early and then start questing later on. And so maybe you send Donald Duck into like a 3/3 just to generate some more lore on the following turn. This one seems pretty cool, but maybe hard to get off the ground.
Yeah, this card has a lot of potential, a lot of combo potential. Threatens to be a very, very powerful card. And yeah, I don't know if it's going to get there. 5 cost in Ruby, like we talked about, is kind of a big ask, but it has a lot of things going for it. It's evasive, it's inkable, it has 1 million willpower. This card could be very strong. I don't know if it's great yet. It might need some support. It might have the support already. It's definitely a card to keep an eye on.
All right, next up, Card Soldiers full deck. This is a 5 cost inkable 5/5. The quest for 2, no abilities. We saw the Honey Wizard and Amethyst. This is just kind of filling out the stats, filling out the gaps, I think, in curves.
Yeah, this card tells you already. The deck's full. There's no room for it.
That's a good one. All right, we're going to be moving on to the 4-drops now. This is Dinnerbell, a 4 cost item with the ability, you know what happens. And it's exert and spend 2 ink to draw cards equal to the damage on chosen character of yours, and then banish them. So we're eating our own character.
This is your favorite thematic card of the set, right?
Yeah.
It's so flavorful, Todd, on so many layers.
Yeah. I'm just going to go with gross, but awesome. Very cool flavor, but I don't like the implications. These are my friends. These are my childhood friends, and I don't want to eat them. Next up, we're going to be talking about Tuk Tuk Wrecking Ball. This is a 4 cost uninkable, 4/5. Doesn't have anything to quest, but it does have Reckless, so can't quest and must challenge each turn if able. The fact that this is not inkable is pretty disappointing. The fact that it doesn't have charge is extremely disappointing. This could have been like a nice compliment to Maui if it would just have rush, but maybe that would make it a little too strong. Mostly, I think that this card just got tweaked a little too much, and I think it's just going to be unplayable.
Yeah, it's unfortunate this card isn't great, but it has some of the best flavor text I've ever seen, which is a good friend is always ready to roll.
Love it. Next up, a pretty generic iteration of Raya. This is Warrior of Kumandra. 4 cost inkable 5/3. The quest for 1. It's storyborn. It's a hero. It's a princess. Has a bunch of random keyword thingy type things on it, but overall no text. And we already have a Scar that's pretty similar, so I don't think it really requires too much chatter about.
Yep.
Okay, we have Namari Nemesis. This is a 4 cost uninkable 3/3 with quest for 1 with the ability. This shouldn't take long, and you may exert this to banish this character to banish chosen character. So I trade my Namari for your anything. What do you think about this one? This one is exciting to me.
Yeah, this one stands out to me too as being pretty strong. There's a ton of matchups where this is, Dragonfire that's delayed for a turn, where they can't remove a readied character, and so you're getting like a tempo positive play, like against a lot of like say Emerald, Amber, aggro, right? You get to play this into a Maui turn where you get to kill 2 of their characters in the same turn, which is really strong. And the 4-drop slot historically is something that's been very weak in Lorcana in general. If you're not shifting, you haven't done anything really impactful on turn 4 usually. This card is, a decent way to fill that gap in the curve.
Yeah, I love too that this works so well with things that can ready it, so that you can quest, ready it, and then activate it. You can also use this to like challenge something that's smaller, like a Simba Protective Cub, then ready it, then activate it if it survives. So a lot to love about this card, and there's a reason why it's a super rare. This is a really unique effect and a very cool ability, and I think Namari might actually just enable more of this like ready style Ruby deck that we haven't seen too much of with things like Shield of Virtue, Next up, we're going to be talking about Mulan, Soldier in Training. There's a 4-cost uninkable 4/3 with Rush and a quest for 1. So this is kind of like Tuk Tuk, the thing that I wanted, except instead of a 4/5, it's a 4/3, and it doesn't have Reckless, so you don't have to challenge. But what do you think about Mulan?
I don't see it seeing much play. Uninkable 4 costs. It's going to have a hard time.
Only 3 willpower, so it doesn't even trade that well, or doesn't eat that well. It only trades. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard when you hit the first one right on the nose with Maui, and then everything forever has to get compared to Maui.
Yeah,
and yeah,
even
it's
Rafiki as well, right? I think Rafiki being a 3-cost rush character, right? It allows you very little flexibility between the 3 and the 5 cost and how you can make rush characters, inkable, uninkable, sizing, etc.
Yeah, for a design aspect, it makes a lot of sense to not have all the cards be the same and have them all be different and unique and stuff. But from a competitive aspect, it does make it so some cards are just clearly better than others, and
right.
That only sucks for us competitive players. Everybody else just gets to enjoy their sweet cards and their sweet characters that they like.
I agree. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Next up, we have Minnie Mouse, Wide-Eyed Diver. This is a 4-cost inkable, very important. 2/3, not very good stats, but it does have shift for 2, so it can shift onto a different Minnie Mouse, including the 1-drop 1/3 Minnie Mouse from Chapter 1. It has evasive, so it's difficult to challenge, and it has the ability Undersea Adventure. When you play a second action in a turn, this character gets +2 lore generation this turn. So with 1-cost Sapphire things that draw a card, the actions, you can play a couple of those and then trigger the Minnie Mouse, so it quests for an extra 2. But you can also use it alongside some songs. I'm mostly just interested in like a pretty cheap evasive character that later in the game you have the ability to kind of juice it a bit. But after seeing the full spoiler, I'm much less high on this card than I was when it was previewed very early in preview season.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put this, is that this is a very exciting card that, we didn't really get all the payoffs we need, all the setup for it we need in this set. But that's okay. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot more sets to come, and this card has the sky's the limit for this card and these types of cards where, as we get more sets and more chapters, they only have the potential to get better.
One thing I really want to stress is that with songs and maybe pairing Amber with Ruby, you can get some of the ready effects like LeFou. And you can maybe just like use early Cinderellas to sing multiple things that will trigger the Minnie Mouse. And, there's all sorts of little mini combos that you can do. And it's one of those cards that will only get better, like you said, as more cards are released. So that's a great point. Next up, let's talk about Shere Khan, Menacing Predator. This is a 3-cost inkable, 3/3, so pretty good stats. And it's inkable with the ability, don't insult my intelligence. Whenever one of your characters challenges another character, gain 1 lore. This card seems pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think this card is very good. I don't expect to be playing a lot of this card. I'll probably usually play a couple in most of my Ruby decks, just as a good way to, situationally when the game is developed where I'm kind of on the back foot, but, I'm slightly slanted towards, questing for a victory instead of just sitting around to win the game. This is a good way to kind of break that parity where I do get to remove your characters via challenging, but I'm also building my lore count so you aren't pulling way ahead the whole time.
Right.
I think this card is a really good role player. And, some decks might want to play 4, but I think, largely, I think a couple is all you really need because you're not always going to want them. Your opponent's not always going to have a bunch of characters for you to challenge. You might have been on the play in an aggressive matchup where they're the ones who have to be challenging because you went first.
Yeah, I think one thing I really like about it is that there's a huge incentive to challenge against the Amber decks early and to play instead of inking your 1-drop and 2-drop characters. And this is just like a perfect payoff for doing that. And it's reasonably sized, and there's no downside because it's inkable. So I think it's an awesome card, and it's one that looks very nice in the showcase frame. All right, so next up, we're going to be talking about an action song. This is the most diabolical scheme. 3-cost uninkable song. Banish chosen villain of yours to banish chosen character. So for me, this is like, how many 1-cost villains can I play with the most diabolical scheme in order to make it worth the sacrificing my own character to deal with my opponents? My gut instinct says this is too significant of a cost.
So I'm going the other direction.
Oh,
I'm looking for how many 3-cost villains can I play that gain me a card back when I play them, like 3-cost Maleficent.
And they can sing it? Oh.
They sing it. So then you are you're not getting the power level because you're effectively still paying 3 for this.
Yeah.
But you get the effect a turn later. But that character comes into play and, put some dynamic pressure on your opponent in that character can do things on my turn once we get back to it. So they have to kind of play around that potential. But then I'm not losing any real advantage when I'm, sacrificing my thing, but I get a huge advantage in that I'm removing your thing plus playing a card for my full ink value that turn that I'm removing your thing.
So what you're saying is another song that's great with Maleficent Sorceress.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a common trend until the end of time.
Okay, awesome.
Let's just hope they never put another one in the card file. Hopefully not in Ruby.
All right, next up, this is Tigger, one of a kind, 3-cost inkable, 3/3. With the quest for 1, and it has the ability Energetic. When you play an action, this character gets +2 strength this turn. Seems like pretty decent limited fodder, but overall pretty weak for constructed.
Yep.
All right. Next, we have the small iteration of Raya. This is Raya Headstrong. 3-cost inkable, 2/3 with the ability Note to Self, don't die. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. She can't quest for the rest of the turn, and she quests for 1.
Yeah, I think this card, it just doesn't have the stats to really go with this ability. I think it's maybe something to keep an eye on if we get some ways to, heal this mid-turn without being something, a competitive way to be doing that, while also having a bunch of ways to pump it. So maybe like going really deep to enable this card, but like a Ruby Sapphire deck that heals it and pumps it with support, but then you're just like doing all of this work to enable a 3-drop that isn't all that good otherwise.
Enable a 3-drop that's only a 2/3 or whatever. It's just like not even that big. No, I feel you.
Yep.
All right. So next up, this is actually my favorite Ruby card in the set. This is Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer. 3-cost inkable, 1/3, quest for 2, and it has evasive. This is just all good, all of it. The only thing that's a downside is 1 strength, but that literally only matters if your opponent has something with evasive to challenge back, or if you just like really desperately need to challenge with it to beat up on something with 2 willpower. But I absolutely adore this extremely cheap and aggressive Ruby Minnie Mouse.
Would you say this card goes into your top 10 most fun things?
This is me putting on my sunglasses, and I was waiting for a pun, but I don't get it. Oh, because of the flavor text.
The pun is the flavor text. That was the pun.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
Remove those sunglasses, Todd.
All right. Oh, man, I got owned on that one. All right, next up, Honest John, 3-cost, uninkable, 2/3, quest for 1, with the ability Easy Street. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, each opponent loses 1 lore.
Yeah, I think this card is sweet. If we get into like a weird metagame where we have enough, kind of Floodborn characters we want to be playing and every deck's aggressive, this could start seeing some play. But, it's meager stats, meager ability. I would imagine just playing like a full Aladdin package from chapter 1 would be better than doing this.
Agree. I mean, I think from just playing the baby Aladdin in chapter 1, we realized that like your opponents just don't quest early because they're afraid of getting their characters destroyed by, slightly larger characters with rush. And I think that that's just going to be a common trend. And I think making your opponent lose lore in general is just going to be a relatively weak ability because of it. Very similarly, I think buffing your character strength, unless it's a massive buff like Phil support 3 or the Queen's, like +4 from the big shift. I think that it's going to be rare that type of an effect has too much impact because the game's not really that much about combat unless you make it about combat and your deck is all about combat. And similarly, this is a card that is trying to be reactive against a thing that your opponent can just ignore and just like, okay, I'll just build up my whole board and then I'll annihilate you in one fell swoop. Next up, Fidget, Radigan's Henchman, 3-cost Inkable, 3/2 with evasive and a quest for 1. Pretty not exciting.
Yeah, evasive characters are not meant to have high strengths and low lores. They are meant to have whatever strength because it's basically irrelevant and as high a lore count as possible.
Yeah, I mean, a 2-cost evasive 0/1, the quest for 2 would be phenomenal, right?
Yep.
I agree. All right, next. 3-cost Inkable Belo, Fun-Loving Bear. It's a 4/3 for 3, the quest for 1, no abilities. Thoughts?
I love Belo in all his shapes, sizes, and forms, but this card is not going to see any competitive play, I tell you that.
All right, here's a question for you. I don't know if you know this or not. I'm more curious myself, but in my brain, Belo Belo, the character from Jungle Book, has the same voice as the Little John from the Robin Hood cartoon movie. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same actor doing both, and it's essentially the same character, just like shifted into a different setting.
Yeah. Do you also know DuckTales?
Oh, woo! Vaguely. Yeah. Oh, is he one of the pilots?
That's Belo.
That is just Belo.
If I remember correctly from my childhood.
Cool.
Either I'm being like Berenstein because it was also the same voice actor and a bear character, or it's actually Belo. I think it was actually Belo.
I think it is actually Belo, so that's cool. All right, moving on. We're going to get to the 2 drops. This is an item called Peter Pan's Dagger, 2-cost uninkable, and it says your characters with evasive get +1 strength.
Same thing. Yeah, it's about...
My evasive characters don't need strength.
Yeah, they need lore.
They need lore. And they need to be cheap.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Pascal's so good, man. I love Pascal.
Pascal's sweet.
All right, next up, this is You Can Fly. This is a 2-cost Inkable Action song. Song is a big deal. And it says, chosen character gains evasive until the start of your next turn. And so essentially that just allows your non-evasive character to challenge an evasive character because, as we know, it will lose it. Oh, no, I guess it says until the start of your next turn.
Oh, it's still a...
it's either or. Yeah.
Draw a card.
At least it's either or, right? Most of those things are just like, was it Robin Hood Unrivaled Archer from the first set in Sapphire? Mm-hmm. When it comes in, it gives something evasive until end of turn. This gives evasive for a full turn cycle, so it can protect something like, I don't know, a Lilo making a wish or some other thing that quests for high amounts. Just makes it more difficult to challenge, but overall, pretty weak card, I think. Next up, Teeth and Ambitions. This is a 2-cost song. Is this the same song from Be Prepared? Like, is this just Be Prepared Part 2? And it says, deal 2 damage to chosen character of yours to deal 2 damage to another chosen character. So this might combo with things that say, want to deal damage to my own stuff, like the 5-cost Donald Duck with evasive that we saw earlier. The fact that it's a song is kind of cool, and maybe it pairs nicely with things like Rapunzel, gifted with healing.
Card is phenomenal. It pairs well with Rapunzel. It pairs well with your Ruby cards that want damage on them. It pairs really well with your Amethyst cards that's going to pick up your character anyway. It's inkable. It does have a downside, but there's a lot of cards to make that downside into an upside. And then it also mitigates all of its own downsides just by being inkable and removal when you really need it to be.
Love it. Love it. All right, moving on. We're going to be talking about another song. This is Go the Distance. This is from Hercules. I can go the distance. Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
something like that. All right, 2 cost Inkable song. It says, ready chosen damaged character of yours. They can't quest for the rest of this turn. Draw a card. This is a little hard to enable because it requires you to have a damaged character. But if you can pair it with the card we just looked at, maybe it does something.
I would be way more in on this card if it said ready chosen character if it's damaged. They can't quest for the rest of the turn, draw a card.
Oh, so it could target anything to draw a card without any real downside? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the downside is that you're paying 2 to do it, but
or singing it wasn't. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, at least you could get the card back whenever you needed it, just as long as there was a character in play, but there has to be a damaged character, and it has to be your damaged character.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Queen of Hearts, Impulsive Ruler. This is a 2 cost Inkable 2/2 with Rush, and it quests for 1. So a small Rush character. More importantly, though, this is something maybe for one of the big Queen of Hearts that do have shift to shift onto for quite cheaply.
Yeah, I think this card is enticing to me, especially pairing well with the larger one that has shift. I think the things that are going to hold this back is twofold. It's Simba Protective Cub, as we expected, just because this is a rusher that doesn't get past it, which I think actually would be fine because this is inkable, and it's good against all their other draws. But I think Teeth and Ambitions is actually going to keep this from seeing a lot of play, just because we have a removal spell that does 2 damage. We don't need a 2-point rusher.
Yeah, we need a 2 cost 2/3 like I think there's a Donald Duck in Ruby from the first set that's a 2 cost 2/3, and that works nicely with it. Next up, we have Mother Gothal, Withered and Wicked. This is a 2 cost Inkable 3/4. That's huge stats. This has to have a major drawback. Quest for 1, and it says, "What have you done?" This character enters play with 3 damage. Okay, so it's basically a 3/1, but you can heal it. So it's something that you can play early that is a nice target for all those Amber heal effects without any real necessary, or without being necessary to challenge.
Yeah, Todd, I thought you said it had to have a drawback, not an upside.
Well, you know what? You're right. This is, I mean, look, at the very worst, this is a 2 cost 3/1, and I think that that's a pretty sweet ability. But the fact that it's, starting willpower is just higher than its actual willpower when it comes in just adds so many cool little combo potentials. And we already know that Rapunzel Gifted with Healing is one of the best cards in the game. And this just adds another thing that might actually make Amber mixed with Ruby playable. I want to point out, most of the things we've talked about in the last few videos has been, hey, how does this pair with Amber? And I'm starting to think that maybe Amber is just the best color by a lot.
You did? You already figured that out last chapter.
I did, but I was hoping that it would change a little bit. But
I was too until they showed the new queen.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay. At least the thing we shift onto will not cost 1 and will probably be in a different color. And then they put a 1 cost into Amber to do it. It's just, why? I want to play other colors than Amber, Todd, but I can't.
Before we continue, I'd like to take this moment to say thank you to our sponsor, Games and Comics Paradise. They're a game store out of Fairfax, Virginia, specializing in trading card games like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, and now Disney's Lorcana. Make sure to check out Games and Comics Paradise.com, GCParadise.com, in order to get all of your TCG supplies today. Thank you so much to sponsoring the Lost Boys. All right, next up, we have Minnie Mouse Zipping Around. Minnie Mouse Zipping Around is a 2 cost 3/2 inkable quest for 1. Nothing super special on this one, but it is a Minnie Mouse for some shifting, and it does have 3 strength to maybe challenge that Simba that you hate so much.
Hey.
Oh, do you like Simba? Because you didn't put it in your Amber Sapphire deck you used to win the Invitational.
Well, that's because I don't need any bodyguards. All my stuff was already so chonky.
I saw Maximus in the deck. I don't think you're telling the truth.
Yeah, I didn't need Maximus.
Maximus just filled out the curve, right?
That's actually, we just needed another good 5-drop.
All right, so what about this Minnie Mouse? Do you like this thing?
This Minnie Mouse is sweet. I think it's just like the Cheshire Cat from Emerald. I could see playing a couple just to answer some Simba Protective Cubs. And yeah, like, it's just a fine filler on a spot in the curve, and it does what it does.
All right. Next up, Lady Tremaine, Overbearing Matriarch. This is a 2-cost uninkable 2/2 with the ability Not For You. When you play this character, each opponent with more lore than you loses 1 lore. Quest for 1. This is kind of like a smaller version of the 3-cost Aladdin. That one is inkable and has a big shift. This is a baby Lady Tremaine that can maybe pair nicely with the shift Lady Tremaine. Have you tried these two together, and how did the uninkable version of the Lady Tremaine feel?
I personally have not. I've shied away from it just because this card is as conditional as you can get, where it is uninkable. It also only triggers when it comes into play if your opponent's ahead on lore.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the payoff for being able to shift your larger Lady Tremaine just hasn't been worth it for me. I have, you know, it has looked pretty strong from my opponent's side, but also I don't see their hand when they're struggling with their uninkables. So, like, I only see the best case scenario for the cards when they're playing them like that. And I try and keep that in mind, and I hope everybody at home does too, where uninkables always look really good when your opponent is playing them because they've already gotten to the point where they're playing them and they aren't rotting in their hand. You got to keep in mind that you aren't seeing the full story on that. That you know, keep in mind that there is a huge cost, and those cards are going to rot in your hand at some amount of the time, especially a situational one like this. And, you know, this card might be worth it. I definitely should be playing some with it to really, you know, find that out for myself. But I kind of like to shortcut a lot of the time. And if I think it's one way, you know, most of the time I'm usually right. So
Plus,
somebody will prove me wrong.
I was going to say, let someone else prove me wrong. I agree with that.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we play the tournaments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we're going to be talking about Boone, Precocious Entrepreneur. There's a 2-cost, 2/3 inkable, the quest for 1. So this is another enabler for the deal 2 to me, deal 2 to you thingy that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been as high on these 2-cost, 2/3s as you have. I don't know if these are necessary even with Teeth and Ambitions. I think the upside of Teeth and Ambitions is that you play them on your larger characters.
Sure. Fair enough. All right, we're getting to the 1-drops now. This is the Sword and the Stone, a 1-cost item, not inkable. And it says, exert and pay 2. Chosen character gets +1 strength this turn for each 1 damage on them. Well,
man,
for a card as iconic as Sword and the Stone, this is quite the stinker, man.
Yeah, I wouldn't even play this if it was inkable.
I wouldn't play it if it was inkable. I wouldn't. Okay. So if it was a 1-cost inkable item that said exert, spend 2 ink to chosen character gets +3 strength until end of turn, I wouldn't play that card, I don't think.
No, maybe if it costs 1.
You know, we have what's the scimitar or whatever in Emerald from chapter 1 that sees no play?
Yeah,
and
it's like 2-cost inkable, give something +1.
Yeah,
I think it's +1.
It's like exert for +1, and yeah, exactly. So like, come on, Sword in the Stone, make it cool, make it do something awesome. Maybe
why isn't this one of the cards that blows something up?
Maybe if you figure out a way to sacrifice it, it like draws 3 cards because you become the freaking king or whatever, and you pulled the sword out. Maybe you sack it to do something. I don't know. I'm just really disappointed because Sword in the Stone is like. It's a great story, iconic from my childhood, and this card is just really not representing what I think the Sword in the Stone should do. So, I don't know. Madge. I'm molding. All right. Getting into the nitty-gritty. 1-cost, What Did You Call Me? This is an action card, not a song. It says, chosen damage character gets +3 strength this turn. What is the deal with only affecting damaged characters? I know that Ruby has the damage... It's thematic. Okay, well then how about have more cards like that Mother Gothal that deal some damage to themselves when they come into play?
You got Teeth and Ambitions. Your opponent's going to deal plenty of damage to your stuff. Don't worry.
I mean, like I said earlier, they might be dealing a lot of damage to my stuff, but they are rarely leaving me with a damaged character lying around. That's the nature of the game. And if your opponent is leaving you with a lot of characters with damage around, then they are likely playing very poorly, or they're just in a very losing position.
Yeah, I think a lot of these cards were designed with Rapunzel gifted with healing being considered like a card in the game, not like the best card in the game that all the other cards have to revolve around.
Well, listen,
you know?
it doesn't even have to do with Rapunzel gifted with healing. Like, if you really think about it, if I have a 3/3 character and you have a 2/2 character, and I quest with my 3/3 character, there's like no universe where on your turn you just ship your 2/2 character into my 3/3 character without a plan to finish it off either that turn or the next turn. It's just a horrible trade of resources. It doesn't really, progress the board in a way that's beneficial for you, and it just essentially opens you up to getting obliterated from your opponent in a number of ways. And also you can just quest with your thing instead. So like,
that's actually the problem with Rapunzel, is that you can't even quest with your thing, because if I quest with my 2/2, right, you just send your 3/3 into it and then also draw 2 cards.
But removing Rapunzel from the equation, like playing with the starter decks, for example, like
but that's kind of what I was getting at, is that like there are already those downsides, which made like my stuff needs to be damaged stuff, a little bit of a hoop, which makes it interesting and fun. But then Rapunzel kind of just comes in and wrecks all of that, because now everybody is cognizant of that no matter what, because that's like the worst case scenario, is like letting their thing be damaged at all anyway. And it kind of it really took the wind out of its sails on this type of theme for me. Hopefully
they move away from this theme in the future, or just find way better ways to enable it, for advantages. All right. Lastly, speaking of wrecking up the place, we're going to be talking about our last card in Ruby. This is Felicia, Always Hungry, a 1-cost inkable 3/1 with Reckless, which means it can't quest and must challenge each turn if able. As far as I can remember, this is the first 1-cost character that has 3 strength, and it's the only 1-cost character that can 1-for-1 trade with a Simba Protective Cub, and that makes it, at least for me, worth a second look, even if it is probably not worth it.
RIP non-shift goons.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah. Felicia and Captain Hook, duelist, I think.
Yeah, forceful
duelist. Those 2 are just going to sit on top of every goon that doesn't have a shift. The fact that they can trade up and trade, laterally with the goons that are seeing play is just, they're all inkable. These cards are just phenomenal. Definitely play them in the decks that can. I can't imagine a steel deck that doesn't play Captain Hook. I'm hard pressed to imagine a Ruby deck that doesn't play some number of Felicias. The card is just so strong.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear. And in matchups where your opponent doesn't play a 1 or a 2 drop, just ink it. It's inkable.
Exactly.
It is resources. Yeah.
And it's, even if you hold it because your opponent didn't, it's really easy to play this and another character in a given turn.
Right.
Because it costs 1.
We've seen Ruby Amethyst Control in the past play the goons in their colors, Sergeant Tibbs and the owl. I can't remember his name. But, Archimedes. And I think Felicia just trumps those in significant ways, and that's great. All right. That's going to do it for Ruby and today's video. But Harlan and I will be continuing our exploration of Chapter 2, Rise of the Floodborn from Disney's Lorcana. And for Harlan Fair, I'm Tandy. Say bye, Harlan.
Bye, Harlan.